The world is full of scary stories and urban myths. But how do you determine which of these is true? And what is fiction? I suggest you draw your own conclusion. I've selected 10 of the most creepy ones for you. Let's get started. Slender Man. According to legend, a Slender Man is a tall, thin man dressed in a black suit with a white shirt and a black tie. He has long, thin arms and legs, and his face is completely devoid of features. His arms are able to stretch, and tentacles grow from his back. When a Slender Man appears, his victim loses his memory, experiences insomnia, paranoia, a coughing fit, and blood flows from his nose. If a Slender Man is spotted in the area, it means that children will soon disappear. He lures them into the forest, deprives them of their sanity, and takes them with him. Those children who were carried away by the Slender Man were never seen again. In 1983, 14 children disappeared in Sterling City in the USA. Their disappearance was associated with a Slender Man. Later, an unknown photographer's picture was found in the city library, which was taken on that day, and it was allegedly attended by a monster. In 2014, 2 teenagers tried to kill their girlfriend because Slender Man ordered them to. Both girls ended up in a psychiatric hospital, one for 25 years, the other for 40. The Black Dog of Meridan. Meridan's black dog from the U.S. state of Connecticut is a small ghost dog that leaves no tracks and makes no sounds. According to legend, if you see a black dog 3 times, you will die. He appears silently, leaves no traces, even in the snow, after which he disappears just as suddenly. In the early 1900s, geologist Pynchon explored Mount Meridan called West Peak. One day he saw a black dog among the trees. When Pynchon turned around to head home, the dog disappeared into the trees. For the second time, the scientists saw a black dog a few years later in the same place. One of his friends, with whom he was climbing the mountain that day, said that he had already seen the dog twice. They wandered and finally found themselves at the top. But the enemy was waiting for them. The black dog stood in front. Pynchon had only turned away for a second when he suddenly heard a terrible scream. His friend fell and hit the rocks. In Meridan, the locals told Pynchon about the legend of the black dog, but he did not believe it. A few years later, the geologist decided to visit the same mountain. He left his apartment at dawn and never returned. His dead body was later found at the bottom of a ravine. Padir. In Brazil, there is a legend about a scary woman named Padir. She comes to men who are afraid, or to those who have had a hearty dinner and lay down on their backs. In this position, the victim of Padir is practically unable to escape. Padir is a bony and thin creature. She has short lower limbs and long dirty hair, a hooked nose, reddish eyes, thin lips, sharp teeth with a greenish tinge. Her long fingers have wide yellow nails. But even more frightening is the laughter and mocking giggles of the monster. If a person hears a characteristic laugh at night, it means that Padir will come to him soon. It is the eerie laughter that precedes her appearance. The monster torments its victim until she suffocates from fright, but the Padir can also leave a person having been fed enough with fear. The Phantom of Benito Juarez Park in Mexico. There is a Benito Juarez Park in the small Mexican town of General del Progreso. This is one of the attractions of the city, but the park was laid out on the site of an old cemetery, so its notoriety spread. The city authorities landscaped the square as best they could. They installed benches and paved paths so that people could enjoy the beauty of nature. However, according to local residents, the authorities woke up the local spirits and a curse was placed on the place. Every evening in the park, someone destroyed the benches and disappeared. Then the authorities hired security guards to patrol the area at night. And so one evening the guard went on duty. At first, everything was calm. The riots began when the park was covered with thick fog. The guard heard a woman scream and went to check what had happened. When he reached the place, an elderly woman dressed in a white dress was standing in front of him. The watchman followed her, and she began to smash and throw benches. When the guard approached her, he saw that the woman had no legs. She was floating in the air. Suddenly, the old woman attacked him and began to beat him violently. The guard managed to escape, and the next morning he told about what he had seen. Shortly after this incident, he contracted a mysterious illness and died. The city authorities forbade telling about this story in the media, but the rumor spread all over the city anyway. No one else wanted to be on duty at night. The locals called the ghost the Phantom of the Park. The girl from the closet. One day, a 57-year-old Japanese man noticed that someone was swapping things in his house. Food was disappearing from the refrigerator, and strange noises woke him up at night. The man decided that he was going crazy because he lived all alone. Both windows and doors in his house were always closed. One day he decided to act and installed hidden cameras in all the rooms. The next day, he watched the footage. In the footage, an unknown woman crawled out of the Japanese man's cupboard. The man assumed that she was a robber, but the police reported that no one had broken the locks. After a thorough search, the woman was found in a small locker. As it turned out, she lived in a Japanese man's house for a year. The Goat Man from Maryland. Many residents of the United States associate Prince George's County in the U.S. state of Maryland with a bloodthirsty monster named Goat Man. According to legend, the monster used to be an ordinary goat breeder. One day his wife became seriously ill, and he had to work tirelessly to help his beloved. But the cruel teenagers decided to make fun of the poor guy and poisoned all his goats. The family was left without a single source of income, and the woman died. Grief turned the farmer into a terrible monster. He ran into the forest and began killing everyone who met him on the way. According to another version, the Goat Man is a scientific experiment of the mad scientist Dr. Fletcher. Local residents believe that illegal experiments on animals were carried out in the Agricultural Scientific Center of the district. Once, by experiment, a scientist created a half-human, half-goat. The researchers decided to keep him alive for study. But the creature grew up and turned into a cruel monster. He killed several scientists and escaped from the center. Whether it's true or a myth, but in the 50s of the XX century, strange events took place in the district. In 1958, residents found a German Shepherd dog dead. The dog was torn to shreds, but its meat was not eaten. In the spring of 1961, 2 students were found dead in the town of Bowie in northeastern Maryland. The girl and the boy went to the forest at night. In the morning, a local hunter found a car with broken windows and many deep scratches on the body. The teenagers' bodies, disfigured beyond recognition, were found in the back seat. The perpetrator was never found. In 2011, the American horror film Deadly Detour, inspired by the Maryland monster, was released. Banshee. According to Irish folklore, a banshee is a spirit from the other world. She appears in the form of an ugly woman to the relatives and friends of the one who is about to die. It is believed that if a banshee did not cry loudly enough before her death, then in the next world her screams will be several times worse. Banshees look like scary screaming women, old women with loose gray hair, a scary wrinkled face, and skeletal thinness. The legend of an American girl who took revenge on her lover. In the USA, there is a terrible legend about a girl who took revenge on her lover for unrequited love. In the small town of Stalin, Texas, there once stood a small church surrounded by graves. There was a cellar next to the church, which was very difficult to find because it was overgrown with grass. The daughter of a priest fell madly in love with a neighbor's boy, but he broke her heart by choosing another girl. They got married. His chosen one got pregnant. Shortly after the birth of the child, the priest's daughter visited the couple. They welcomed her cordially, but the girl herself looked at their child with hatred. The priest's daughter suddenly attacked her parents and cut both their throats. Then she dragged their bodies to the hill where the church stood. She left the dead in the cellar and put the living child between them. The priest's daughter closed the door to the cellar and died soon after. The bodies in the cellar could not be found for 3 weeks. Many people believe that the voice of a crying child can still be heard at night near the church. The house is a corpse in Mexico. In the Mexican city of Monterrey, there is a famous legend about an abandoned building called the Corpse House. The strange structure was built in the 1970s, but no one has ever lived in the building. From the street, the house looks like a structure made of concrete pipes. According to legend, the house was built by a wealthy couple who had a sick, paralyzed daughter. My father wanted to build a special house that would be suitable for people with disabilities. Ramps that led from one floor to another were included in the design of the house. The family started building. One day the girl wanted to look at the house. She started riding on ramps. Her parents were distracted for just a moment when suddenly her wheelchair flew down the ramp. The girl couldn't stop. As a result, she flew out the window and crashed to her death. Years later, the unfinished building was put up for sale. But no one wanted to buy it for a long time. One day there were customers. They came to see the building with their little son. While the couple were examining the situation, the boy went upstairs, and after a few minutes they heard him scream. On the top floor, he was fighting with a little girl. An unknown woman grabbed their son and threw him out the window. The boy died. The girl could not be found. After this story, the authorities fenced off the territory. Mary Shaw. In 1941, a certain Mary Shaw performed with her Billy doll in one of the theaters of the American city of Ravens Fair. One day, one of the spectators, a little boy, called a woman a liar. He saw that the woman's lips were moving when Billy was talking. A few weeks later, the unfortunate critic disappeared. Residents of the city and the boy's parents accused the ventriloquist of his disappearance. Mary Shaw was found dead soon after. According to local legend, the Ashen family, the boy's relatives, committed lynching against the woman. They burst into the dressing room, made Shaw scream, and then tore out her tongue. Before her death, the woman wished that all her dolls were buried with her. There were 101 of them. After the ventriloquist's funeral, mass murders began in Ravens Fair. And the victims of the crimes were those people who raised their hand on the show. Their tongues were torn out just like Mary's. Thanks for watching.
And don't forget to subscribe.